All right, folks, I'm live, going live. I'm going to wait for some of you to get over here and join the live stream. Let me just go over to the video and let people know that the live stream is on right now. Live stream is on. 5 more members all right. Who are on the left. That gives you an idea of what... Let me stop that. All right, there's Matt. How you doing, Matt Finn? Good to see you. And I've got to announce to my lovely wife what's happening. I don't think she's in the house yet. Rainey? She was out watering the garden. So Matt Finn, yeah, there you go. I'll probably say it a couple more times. There's a couple of people in here now. Hopefully people will get the message and come on over to the live stream. And apparently, as you know, I pre-record the show earlier in the day, and I always pasted over the earlier show from the day before. So apparently, I deleted the current night's show and left last night's show up in the second segment, which pisses me off because the second segment was so good. So I've got information here in front of me. I got all my notes from earlier. And we're just going to go ahead and jump into those notes. And I'll just kind of give you a live feed of. So, Audrey, I don't know if you heard all of that, but I accidentally put in last night's second segment into the upload for the show tonight. And the way that happens is I set up a show. It's got all the audio, all the video. It's got all my music, my bumps that are stationed visually in the right places for upload as a video. And I uploaded it. And what I do is I grab the new video when I pre-record and I drag it into that. I divide it up, put the second half past the middle segment and the ads. Those are the two segments, by the way, that I need to have for the radio show. So if you listen audibly over at Odyssey tonight, you could actually hear tonight's show, but you can't see it over on the video. So I thought I'd give you a chance if you want to take this advantage to not have to rewatch last night's second segment. We'll do this one. And you know what I'll do? I will repost tonight's show corrected so it's up in the archives. But why don't we just do this live now, at least for a half an hour? But it's Friday night and I'm going live, so we'll see what happens. Can't guarantee I won't have kids in here. Can't guarantee you won't hear screaming as Rainey has to deal with them tonight. They've had attitude all day today. I had to come down. Now, this was not part of the original segment for the show, but I had to come down on my kids pretty hard today. And it bothered me after the fact that I was that hard on them. But I asked them to pick up their messes in the living room. And I said, look, your mom is out. Your mom is working. As most of you know, my wife has started working again. She's a massage therapist. And so she is gone, and she had to do 4 or 5 different massages today. So she was pretty wiped out. And here I'm setting up my notes here. I'm calling up my notes so I can go through tonight's show. But I'm looking for the place where I left off last night so I can restart that again today and talk about it. But so I said to my kids today, I said, Mom's coming home around 5 o'clock. I said, I need you to clean up your messes in the living room. It's ungodly. It's amazing. It was cleaned yesterday, vacuumed yesterday. Everything in its place. My kids will destroy that through the course of a morning. And them and told them, let's get going. Let's get this done. So let's make Mom happy when she gets home. And of course, it's like pulling teeth. This is normally Sunday morning fare. And I asked them again. I said, hey, guys, get the mess cleaned up. Mom's going to be home in an hour or so, and I want this place to look nice when she comes up. And I'm not picking up after you. I'm not your maid. And so that went on 2 or 3 more times. I came back here. I was working. I was designing a book cover this afternoon for a client. And so I'm here at my working, and I go back out there, and they're kind of a couple of things picking up. They're mostly screwing around. I said, hey guys, have fun, but I need you to clean this up. I said, I tell you what, I'm turning off the music and the TV, so there's no incentive to stand still and stare at the TV while you're working. I said, it'll take you 15 minutes to clean up your mess. And I said, you guys get that done? I said, we're going to go for some ice cream cones at Dairy Queen. Boom! Incentive, reward. And came back here, started working. Not even 5 minutes later, silent out there. I thought, boy, they're cleaning awfully quiet. I go out, mess is still there. Nobody's there. Then I hear them upstairs. They're watching TV upstairs. In 5 minutes later, after like the fourth time, I said, come on, guys, get going. Get your butts in gear. Let's get this done. So I yelled them up a little bit, made them shut off the TV upstairs, come down. What are you doing? Oh, we didn't know you meant right now. I'm like, what? I said, here's the deal. No ice cream. And I said, you will avoid public lashings and pillaring if you do not get this done now. And it took about 3 more checks for me to come out and look around and go, I pulled the chair, the rocking chair out, which you can see it's not blocking anything. Pulled it out. There's a pile of shit in there. Clean it up. So that was the day. We finally got it clean about the time Rainey got home. And so Rainey's tired out. So Rainey's going to take a break. And now in all of this, I grabbed the wrong file for the second half of tonight's show. And so you're seeing last night's over on the other stream right now. So I said, you can go tune in Odyssey Radio and listen to it over there, tonight's show. Or let's just open it up here and I'll start tonight. Let's do this right here. And so I want to find the spot where I left off last night. And let me just do a little scrolling here. I left off, I know we were talking about how they laid waste to the Caribbean islands where the where the Taino lived, and we spoke about them last night. Let's see. I think I've gone way past the spot. Let's see if we get there. Boom, boom, boom. I'm looking for where I left off. Talking about manifest destiny. There it is. I found it. Okay. So we can pick up from last night to tonight. I want to talk about this a little bit. And I think you'll enjoy this. Enjoy is one way to put it. I don't think it's an enjoyable topic. But I do believe that it is something that needs to be talked about. And now I just lost it. I just skimmed through my notes and I totally lost where I was. Hang on. Cut me a little slack here. Because I screwed up my show so bad tonight. Again, I will repost tonight's show, so it's at least up in the archives. And let me find it. In his office, we talked last night about the guy who had the governor of Iowa who had the skeleton in his office. I just saw this, and I somehow hit a button here, and I'm totally out of where I was. Bear with me. I'm trying to talk through it, and so I'm not concentrating fully on what I'm saying, and I'm not fully concentrating on what I'm looking for. I didn't talk about Crazy Horse. Past it, and I can't find my spot again. Hang on. So, territories of Wisconsin, Iowa, View in the Office, the Winnebagos, we talked Valleylands. We talked about how the Miamis fought the battles to preserve those lands. Once I get there, it'll all make sense. So you gotta Hold on. I'm going to go silent for just a second here while I'm looking for the right spot. We talked about the permanent Indian frontier. We talked about Manifest Destiny. Let's see. Teenage Crazy Horse. I don't remember mentioning Crazy Horse last night, but let me go on here and make sure I'm not. I don't remember mentioning Kicking Bird. I don't remember mentioning the Arapaho. So we're missing. You remember Kicking Bird, the character played by Graham Greene in Dances with Wolves? He was a real guy. But he's a bit of an amalgam in that movie. But let's see. We did talk about the Civil War. I don't know if I talked about that this morning, and that's why it looks familiar. Boom. I'm just looking to see where I ended last night. I lost my place in my own notes. So we did talk about, again, that governor who, okay, we'll just find a place and we'll start. Because I talked about how they had, did we talk about the governor who had the skeleton in his office? The governor of Iowa, the Native American skeleton in his office? If we didn't, well, I know we talked about Wilhelm Kieft. So, sold into slavery in the West Indies, English colonists, the Narragansetts, showed them how to plant corn and cultivate it. That was Squanto. We talked about Squanto last night, right? We did. I don't know how I had this in front of me and now I lost it. There it is. Found it. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's. All right. Let me take a look at the chat room. I left off at the forts. I think I left off with this. I had said that the Europeans who followed Columbus to the New World, that they had destroyed the vegetation of the islands, and all the inhabitants, animal. And after turning it into a wasteland, they had. This is with the Tainos, where Columbus had originally landed in San Salvador. And I think that's where we left off last night. I know we talked about some of these other things. We talked about how on the mainland of America, the Wampanoags of the Massasoit and King Philip had vanished. Remember King Philip? He was the father of Pocahontas. That's the European name they gave him. And he had vanished along with, they called him Powhatan, but he also had another name, which I can't remember. It's a Massasoit Sassacook or something like that, and I can't remember it. And along with the Chesapeakes, the Chickahominies, the Potomacs of the Great Powhatan Confederacy. Now I got my phone ringing. I got to push that off. That is Matt Locke calling me, the Matt Locke Show. I will have to call him back in a little bit. So, what you've got now is the scattered, reduced to remnants were the Pequot, the Montooks, the Nanakooks, the Mampapungas, the Catawbas, the Chirwas, the Miamis, the Hurons, the Eries, the Mohawks, the Seneca, the Mohegans, and only Uncas is remembered from that. If you remember Uncas from even the book and the movie, The Last of the Mohicans. He was the only one that was ever remembered from them. Their musical names, these Indian names, remained forever fixed on the American land, but their bones were forgotten in 1,000 burned villages, or they were lost in forests. And hey, Rainey, you can come and say, I'm going live. I accidentally put last night's second segment up for tonight's show. Why don't you come over and say hi quick? Way to go, Slick. Yeah, there you go. Leave it to my wife. Way to go, Slick, she said. So here, let me get the mic out of the way.
Don't you know how to manage the kids and do all your jobs while you're home?
Yeah, I do. I just looked at the wrong file note. There's my beautiful wife.
Hi, everybody.
There she is. So after 4 or 5 massages today?
4.
4. How are your arms?
My arm's okay. My wrist hurt.
Okay. I'll bet.
Yeah.
That's
bad body mechanics today, but
like be strong like ox, smart like cart.
Yeah.
So but that's what I'm doing now. So I'm going to kind of do a live version of what I recorded this morning.
All right.
And
exciting.
Very exciting. So
okay. Have fun, everybody.
Purty. You look pretty.
But
all right, screw y'all. I'm going with her. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, come with me.
So, hey, Rainey, show me your muscles, says Audrey.
My muscles.
Muscles. Here, I'll show you mine now. Sorry. So,
yeah.
She always looks pretty. I know.
Yeah, thank you.
She looks pretty when she gets up in the morning and staggers out of bed. And I saw her. She got up this morning, woke up.
You didn't see me this morning. I even laughed at myself.
I saw you this morning. It was about 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I was awake. I was considering getting up. And then you moved. And I thought, are you waking up too? And you got up and you looked at me like this. And your hair was all over. And you had on that skimpy little tank top and your little undies. And you got up and you didn't say anything. I said, good morning. And you went, nice. And you shambled to the bathroom and you came back. You crawled into bed and pulled everything over the top of you and went right back to sleep. And I touched your shoulder. I said, good morning. And you went, there was nothing.
Nice.
So,
well, I woke up with really bad indigestion.
Oh, did you?
And went and got 2 Tums. And when I actually woke up and looked at myself, I had the white crusty.
Oh, nice.
On the side of my mouth. I slept good after those Tums, I guess.
White crusty drool.
Yeah, it's all
That's
sweet.
the best.
It's sweet Tums mouth in the morning. Ugh.
So when you look in the mirror in the morning, you go, bleh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's a good thing I looked at my face before I ran to work. Or I would have white crusty all day.
And she got up and she was so tired from yesterday when you had 4 massages yesterday. And folks, that doesn't sound like a lot of massages until for an hour to an hour and a half each, you're rubbing some fat, hairy guy's body. And they'll go, hey, could you give me deep massage? And she's like, no, I do massage. I'm not doing deep tissue on you. I'll kill myself. So
you got to see Moose for that.
That's right. So there you go.
Yeah. If anybody's local, Spy 10, soon to be known as Local Luxury. Come check it out.
Local Luxury. What a name for a spa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good name.
So all the owners of that put it out to everybody. Let's get all the ideas to work. And then they came up with their own name.
Yeah.
So
everybody had
show them your t-shirt, by the way. This is a t-shirt this was Rainey requested this shirt.
Okay,
let's see. Can you stand up? There it is. That's the one that says, hop in, loser. We're doing butt stuff. And you got the UFO up here. You get the little guy right here. That's me. And so you can get that shirt, by the way, over my Etsy page. So
if you don't have it yet, go get it. And I stuck it up on my Etsy page too. So if you guys want to go check out my Etsy page.
Yes, go see Mama Hawthorne's Studio.
Yes.
So it's Mama, M-A-M-A, Hawthorne's, H-A-T-H-O-R-S Studio, S-T-U. So there's 2 S's together. It looks funny, but it works. So there you go.
Yeah. Check it out. Anyways,
so
all right. Get out of your hair. You can get back to entertaining everybody. And
all right.
I'm going to go chase that munch
Fantastic.
Down.
Now get out of my space.
Right.
Get out of my space, invader. Bye. Okay. Where were we before we so rudely interrupted? So there you go. Yeah, you can go to my Son of a Patriot page. I think you can find her page linked up to it. Here, I'll type it in there in case you guys want to look it up. It's Etsy.com/shop/ Mama Hathor's studio. And I don't know if it's studio or studios, but there it is. You can check that out, see if it works. And all right, let's get into what we were talking about. This the Native American issue. This is what we were talking about today. This is what I pre-recorded, and of course is gone. And I got to repost it. For those of you joining us a little late in the live, I screwed up the pre-record this morning, and I put up the pre-record for tonight, and I inadvertently left yesterday's second segment in place and deleted the new second segment. I was wearing this shirt. So you see me in the dark blue shirt over there? That's yesterday. So sorry about that. I will reload that particular show, and so it's there in the archives. So you can go watch it anytime you want. But there won't be a chat room with it. So, all right. Let's see. I'm just looking to see if there's anything I need to address over in the chat room, which is over here today. So there you go. All right, let's move on. Hey, Steph, how you doing? Good to see you. All right, everybody. What we're talking about, we're picking up where we left off last night with this whole, and what did I call tonight's show? I called it the Permanent Indian Territory, or Permanent Indian Frontier, removal. This started a process of removal. Remember, they'd taken all the eastern tribes now, and the United States said, you can't live on your land anymore. We're going to push you all across the Mississippi River to the west of the Mississippi. Permanent Indian territory. Permanent. And this was written into treaties. What did we do? We said, well, settlers, and we even stationed forts all up and down the Mississippi, and troops to keep people from crossing over. It was illegal for whites to cross over into Permanent Indian Frontier, it was called. And yet the whites did it anyway. And so what happened? They pushed them from the Mississippi River to the 95th meridian, and which basically runs from almost from Minneapolis in the north, or Lake of the Woods in the north of Minnesota, straight line south down to Galveston, Texas. And so Permanent Indian Frontier got moved from the Mississippi just really a few miles over, but it was the 95th parallel. So settlers could come in and start filling the gaps on the west side of the Mississippi. And so the decade following the establishment of this Permanent Indian Frontier, it was a really bad time for the Eastern Native Americans. And the great Cherokee Nation had survived more than 100 years of the white man's wars, diseases, whiskey, but now it was to be blotted out because the Cherokees numbered thousands. The removal to the west was planned to be in but discovery of, guess what? Appalachian gold. Gold in them hills. Within their territory, the Cherokees brought on a clamor for their immediate wholesale exodus out of the Appalachians. And so during the autumn of 1838, General Winfield Scott's soldiers rounded them all up, concentrated them into camps. What does that sound like? That sounds like concentration camps. And during the autumn of 1838, and concentration camps, a few hundred escaped into the Smoky Mountains, and many years later were given a small reservation in North Carolina. And so from the prison camps, they were started toward the west to the Indian Territory. And on the long winter trek, one of every 4 Cherokees died from cold, from hunger, from disease. And they called that march the Trail of Tears. If you've ever heard of the Trail of Tears, that's what that was. The Choctaws, the Chickasaws, the Creeks, the Seminoles also gave up their homelands in the south. And in the north, the surviving remnants of the Shawnee, the Miami, the Ottawa, the Hurons, the Delawares, and many other once mighty tribes walked or traveled by horseback and wagon beyond the Mississippi, carrying their shabby goods with them, their rusty farming tools, bags of seed corn, and all of them arrived as refugees, poor relations in the country of the proud and free Plains Indians. And there's something I want to say here too, is that I see what Julie said. Hey, Julie, how you doing? She said, I hate how white people have taken people's lands and homes. And what you have that happened in the United States was white Europeans who founded the nation along the eastern seaboard. They wanted to keep moving in and claiming property. And so what we have today is a very different situation than existed 200 years ago. The sad truth is that maybe even the land I'm sitting on in my house, not even maybe, the land I'm sitting on in my house was once Indian land in this area. Dakota. May have been Lakota in this area. And am I going to give my house and my land back to the native tribe that once lived here? No. And I don't think there's very many people who will do that. We're in a different paradigm now. The problem is that the conquest already took place. And all of these Native Americans were displaced. They had their homes stolen, their land stolen, everything taken from them, their lives, under reservations. How would you feel today, knowing that your land, once we gain this knowledge, we go, wait a minute, where I live right now was once Indian land. I don't know if my mic's too far away. I didn't realize I still had it out there. Sorry, folks. That everything we sit on now is pretty much Indian that was stolen from them. And so how do we deal with that, especially in light of the things that are taking place with race riots nowadays? Slaves. I saw somebody put a very sarcastic quip up, and it meant something today. Somebody said, if we can't hold the rioters and the people who tear down statues and burn businesses, if we can't hold those people accountable now, why do they want to hold us accountable for something that happened 200 years ago? And that's a really good way to to look at it now. We are not responsible for the sins of our fathers. Now, had things been done justly and rightly, we would probably still be here, but America would look very different. The United States would look very different. You might still have independent tribes out to the west here. And so I just saw something. I just okayed a message from Julie here, and I lost it. Oh, you said if all the land was given back, there would be nowhere for the whites to go. That's true. We're in a new paradigm now. This may have been something that took place 300 to even 100 years ago. In the 1890s was the last massacre of Native Americans. We talked about this back in September of last year about Wounded Knee, the ghost dance at Wounded Knee. So here's the deal, though. Scarcely were the refugees settled behind the security of the permanent Indian frontier west of the 95th meridian when soldiers began marching westward through the Indian country. The white men of the United States, who talked so much of peace but rarely seemed to practice it, were marching to war with the white men who had conquered the Indians of Mexico. And when the war with Mexico ended in 1847, this is when the Alamo took place, by the way. Remember the Alamo, our war with Santa Anna and the Mexicans. The United States took possession of a vast expanse of territory, reaching from Texas to California. And all of it was west of the permanent Indian frontier. So we pushed all the Eastern Indians out across the Mississippi, then across the 95th meridian, permanent Indian territory. White men cannot go past the 95th meridian legally. But we marched through it to get to California and Texas. Then we took California and Texas and everything up the west coast to what is now Oregon and Washington State. So what happened to the permanent Indian territory? It's now sandwiched between the East Coast and the West Coast. And there they are. So when the war with Mexico ended in 1847, the United States took possession of all that territory to the west of what is now the permanent Indian frontier at that time. And so in 1848, what do you suppose happened? Think of 1849. What happened at Sutter's Mill in 1849? Gold! They discovered gold in them there hills in California. Gold! Get your stakes now! And what happened? The West got flooded with prospectors. And within a few months, all these fortune-seeking Easterners, by the thousands, were crossing the permanent Indian territory that they were legally not supposed to set foot on. Indians who lived or hunted along the Santa Fe and the Oregon trails, they'd grown accustomed to seeing an occasional wagon or a wagon train that was licensed for traders, trappers, missionaries. Now suddenly, the trails were absolutely filled with wagons, and the wagons were filled with white Eastern Americans. And most of them were bound for California gold, but some turned southwest for New Mexico or northwest for Oregon country. And to justify these breaches of the permanent Indian territory, or frontier it was called, I keep saying territory, the policymakers in Washington invented this thing called manifest destiny. Now, you've probably heard this term. Have you ever heard it defined? It's a term which lifted land hunger to a lofty plane. All it was hunger for the land that the Indians had. And the Europeans and their descendants were ordained by destiny of God to rule all of America from sea to shining sea and everything in between. It was their manifest destiny, manifest by God. And they were the dominant race on the continent by then. And they were responsible for the Indians, along with their lands, their forests, their mineral wealth. Only the New Englanders who had destroyed or driven out all their Indians spoke against manifest destiny. Oh, you can't do that to those poor tribes, but they had already driven the tribes out over 150 years earlier. And so 150 years earlier. So in 1850, although none of the Modocs, the Mojaves, the Paiutes, the Shestas, the Yumas, or 100 other lesser-known tribes that don't roll off the tip of your tongue, all along the Pacific coast were consulted on the matter. California became the 31st state of the Union. And in the mountains of Colorado, guess what they found? Gold! There's gold in them mountains! And it was discovered, and new hordes of prospectors swarmed across the plains and into the Colorado territory. Two vast new territories were organized at that time, Kansas and Nebraska, now encompassing virtually all of the country of the Plains tribes. In 1858, Minnesota became a state. This is where Fort Snelling was built around 1800. 58 years later, after Fort Snelling was built, Minnesota became a state. Its boundaries were extended 100 miles beyond the 95th meridian, the permanent Indian frontier that by treaty no white man could set his foot on, but they had already done that to get to Oregon, to get to Washington State, to get to California, to get to New Mexico. And so now they have, in essence, because of manifest destiny, God has manifest that it is our destiny to own the whole continent, the white Europeans of the East. And now the Southwest, sandwiching in the Indians in their permanent, quote unquote, by treaty, Indian frontier. All the whites crossed that. And they drove miles beyond the 95th meridian. So only a quarter of a century after enactment of Sharp Knife, Andrew Jackson, the president, his Indian Trade and Intercourse Act, white settlers had driven in both the north and south flanks of the 95th meridian line and advanced miners and traders and penetrated the center. Boom. All you got now is a little pocket in the middle. Now, it was then, well, kind of in the north, too, you had the Dakotas yet. And it was then at the beginning of the 1860s that the white men of the United States went to war with one another. The Great Civil War, the blue coats against the gray coats. And the Great Civil War. In 1860, there were probably 300,000 Indians in the United States and its territories, most of them living west of the Mississippi. And according to varying estimates, their numbers have been reduced by 1/2 to 2/3 since the arrival of the first settlers in Virginia at Plymouth Rock in New England. The survivors were now pressed between expanding white populations on the east and along the Pacific coasts, and more than 30 million Europeans and their descendants now occupied what was legally the United States of America, with the permanent Indian frontier squished down to almost nothing in the middle. 30 million to about 300,000. And if the remaining tribes, the free tribes, believed that the white man's Civil War would bring any respite from his pressures for territory, they were disillusioned and found out how wrong they were. The most numerous and powerful Western tribe were the Sioux, the Dakota, or the Lakota, which was separated into several subdivisions. The Santee Sioux lived in the woodlands of Minnesota, and for some years, had been retreating before the advance of settlements. Little Crow of the Mdewakanton Santee, after being taken on a tour of the eastern cities, was convinced that the power of the United States could not be resisted. And he was reluctantly attempting to lead his tribe down the white man's road. We've got to follow their ways. They're the new masters. Wabasha, another Santee leader, had also accepted the inevitable, but both he and Little Crow were determined to oppose any further surrender of their land. We'll go along with you, but we're not giving you any more of our land. Farther west in the Great Plains were the Teton Sioux, the Horse Indians all, and they were completely free. And they were somewhat contemptuous of their woodland Santee cousins, who had capitulated to the settlers. And most numerous and most confident of their ability to defend their territory were the Oglala Tetons. And at the beginning of the white man's Civil War, their outstanding leader was Red Cloud. He was 38 years old, a shrewd warrior chief. Still too young to be a warrior was Crazy Horse, a name you'll recognize. An intelligent and fearless teenaged Oglala Sioux. Now, among the Hunkpapas, a smaller division of the Teton Sioux, a young man in his mid-20s had already won a reputation as a hunter and a warrior. And in tribal councils, he advocated unyielding opposition to any intrusion by white men. He was Tatanka Yotanka, the Sitting Bull. You all know who Sitting Bull is. He was a mentor to an orphan boy named Gal, and together with Crazy Horse of the Oglalas, they would make history 16 years later in 1876. You know what happened in 1876? Let me just see I'm going to check your history. Anybody in the chat room, what happened with the Oglala Sioux in 1876? They made history. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gal. Anybody know? Somebody over there. Tell me. Battle of the Little Bighorn. Boom, Iowa Joe. They made history when Custer and his soldiers woefully, what's the word I'm looking for? Underestimated the natives. You want to see a good reenactment of that battle? It's very short, but it's in the movie version of the book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee was not a fictional novel. It was not a narrative novel, but they made it into a movie about certain persons and followed them through the movie. And there's this scene where the camera, and I'm sure it was all digitally done, but the camera is above the camp of the Native Americans, which was a confederation of just about every Plains tribe that existed at that time. The camera is up above. You see the tribes, and it sees a kid running out of a teepee, somebody else running for a horse. Then it's backing out and flying above, and you see everybody running for horses, and it flies out over the plains with all these Indians on horseback riding, and it comes up and over the ridge in one fluid shot, and you see the battle going on at the greasy grass, which is what the Native Americans called the Little Bighorn. And so it's pretty cool. So it's worth watching just for that scene, if nothing else. I may post that scene on my Facebook later tonight. You might get a chance to watch that. So closely associated. Spotted Tail. I didn't mention him. Although he wasn't yet 40, Spotted Tail was already a chief spokesman for the Brule Tetons. And they lived on the far western plains. The Spotted Tail was a handsome, smiling Indian. He loved fine feasts and compliant women. Don't we all, guys? Don't we all? Don't I love that, Rainey? A fine feast and a compliant woman.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah, totally, she says. And so he enjoyed his way of life and the land he lived on, but he was willing to compromise to avoid war. So closely associated with the Teton Sioux were the Cheyenne. In the old days, the Cheyenne had lived in the Minnesota country of the Santee Sioux, but gradually moved westward. They acquired horses, and now the northern Cheyennes shared the Powder River and the Bighorn country with the Sioux, and frequently camping near them. Dull Knife, in his 40s, was an outstanding leader of the northern branch of the tribe. And to his own people, Dull Knife was known as Morning Star. But the Sioux called him Dull Knife, and most contemporary accounts use that name when you read about him. And so the southern Cheyenne had drifted below the Platte River, and they established villages on the Colorado and the Kansas plains. Black Kettle of the southern branch had been a great warrior in his youth. In his late middle age, he was acknowledged chief, but the younger men and this is a name I haven't said for a while, the Hatamitaneos, I said it this morning the same way when I recorded this, the Hatamitanos, the dog soldiers of the southern Cheyenne, were more inclined to follow leaders such as Tall Bull and Roman Nose, who, you can tell that was an English name given to him, who were in their prime. The Arapaho were old associates of the Cheyenne. They lived in the same areas as the Cheyenne. Some remained in the northern Cheyenne. Others followed the southern branch. Little Raven, in his 40s, was at this time the best-known chief of the northern Cheyenne. And south of the Kansas-Nebraska Buffalo Ranges were the Kiowas. Some of the older Kiowas would remember the Black Hills, but the tribe had been pushed southward before the combined power of the Sioux, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho. And so by 1860, the Kiowa had made their peace with the Northern Plains tribes and had become allies of the Comanches, whose southern plains they had entered. Listen to all these tribal names that were all throughout America and Central America. This is the Plains states. And the Kiowa had several great leaders, an aging chief, Satunk, two vigorous fighting men in their 30s, Satanta and Lone Wolf, and an intelligent statesman, Kicking Bird. Now, Kicking Bird is the character that was amalgamized in Kevin Costner's Dances with Wolves. And so the Comanches, constantly on the move and divided into many small bands, lacked the leadership of their allies. Ten Bears, very old, was more a poet than a warrior chief. In 1860, the half-breed Quanah Parker, who would lead the Comanches into the last great struggle to save their buffalo range, was not yet 20 years old. In the arid Southwest were the Apache, the veterans of 250 years of guerrilla warfare with the Spaniards, who taught them the finer arts of torture and mutilation, but never subdued the Apache. And although few in number, probably not more than 6,000 divided into several bands, their reputation as tenacious defenders of their harsh and pitiless land was already well established. Mangus, Colorado, in his late 60s, had signed a treaty of friendship with the United States, but he was already disillusioned by the influx of miners and soldiers into his territory. Cochise, a name you'll recognize. His son-in-law still believed he could get along with the white Americans. Victorio and Delche distrusted the white intruders, and they gave them a wide berth. Nana, in his 50s, but tough as rawhide, considered the English-speaking white men no different from the Spanish-speaking Mexicans that he'd been fighting his entire life. Geronimo, another very famous name among the Apache, in his 20s had not yet proven himself. He was still a young man. The Navajo were related to the Apache, but most Navajo had taken the Spanish white man's road and were raising sheep and goats, cultivating grain and fruit. And as stockmen and weavers, some bands of the tribe had grown wealthy. Other Navajo continued as nomads. They raided their old enemies, the Pueblos, the white settlers, or prosperous members of their own tribe. Manuelito, a stalwart, mustachioed stock raiser, was a head chief, chosen by election of the Navajos, held in 1855. And in 1859, when a few wild Navajo raided the United States citizens in their territory, the U.S. Army retaliated not by hunting down the culprits, but by destroying the Hogans and shooting all the livestock belonging to Manuelito and members of his band. And by 1860, Manuelito and some Navajo followers were enraged in an undeclared war with the United States in northern Mexican territory and Arizona. Do you see this repeating pattern from what we talked about last night? All the Indian tribes along the eastern seaboard were pushed out by colonial America, and eventually the first 13 states. They were pushed out. They were not hostile against the whites until the whites continued to push them off their land, steal their land from them, raid them, and slaughter people in their villages, which happened all along the east. And the Indians started to retaliate. Do you think this message did not spread the further west they got pushed? So, in the far west, most of the tribes were too small. They were too divided. They were too weak to offer a lot of resistance. The Modocs of Northern California, that's Audrey territory, and Southern Oregon, numbering less than 1,000. They fought guerrilla fashion for their lands. The Kinpuash, called Captain Jack, or Kinpuash was his name, Captain Jack. He was called Captain Jack by the California settlers, was only a young man in 1860. His ordeal as a leader would come dozens of years down the road. Northwest of the Modocs and the Nez Perez territory, they'd been living in peace with white men since Lewis and Clark had passed through their territory in 1805. And again, I'm going to say now, if you want to read a fantastic book, it's written by the late Stephen Ambrose, historian, called Undaunted Courage, about the Lewis and Clark expedition. Fantastic book. You can also get it on audio. And I jump back and forth from reading it to listening it to audio and so on back and forth. You will enjoy that book. In 1855, one branch of the tribe called the Nez Perez that ceded the Nez Perez lands to the United States for settlement, and they agreed to live within the confines of a large reservation that was set up for them there. Other bands of the tribe continued to roam between the Blue Mountains of Oregon and the Bitter Roots of Idaho. Because of the vastness of the Northwest country, the Nez Perce, I think I was saying Nez Perces, the Nez Perce believed that there would always be land enough for both white men and the Indians to use as each saw fit. So they were willing to comply. There's enough here. Heinmut Tukalaket, later known as Chief Joseph, would have to make a fateful decision in 1877 between peace and war. And in 1860, he was 20 years old. He was the son of a chief. In the Nevada country of the Paiutes, a future messiah named Wavoka, who we talked about on this show back in September, Wavoka introduced the ghost dance. He would later have a brief but powerful influence upon the Indians of the West. But he was only 4 years old in 1860. So during the following 30 years, these leaders and many more would enter into history and legend. Their names would become as well known as those of the men who tried to destroy them. Most of them, young and old, would be driven into the ground long before the symbolic end of Indian freedom came at Wounded Knee in December of 1890. And we talked about Wounded Knee in 1890 and also the standoff at Wounded Knee in 1974. We talked about both of those several months back. Now, over a century and a half later, in an age without heroes, they're perhaps the most heroic of all Indians. Those that all these people I named and who they became. And that's really where I left off today for the second segment of the show. So I'm going to look back at the chat room a little bit here. I haven't paid close attention because I wanted to get through that material. So there's a lot going on right now. How would you compare? I'm asking you this. What's going on now in our current racial crises that are going on versus what happened to the Native American? I want to say that making a comparison would be a logical fallacy, other than to compare the government of the United States in both eras of slavery and pushing Native Americans off of their land and utterly destroying, almost wiping out their tribes. Remember, it was General Sheridan that said, Civil War hero of the Union Army. He was the one who coined the phrase, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. And he led policy in pushing Native Americans west. Hey, Darth, how you doing? Welcome tonight. Barbara, good to see you too. So I'm going to scroll back here and just see if there's Michelle, Cannon Free. Good to see you. How you doing? Let's see. I see Captain Morgan Rum in there somewhere being talked about. Let's see what else we got. I'm just going back through. Not even you knew what we talked about last night. Matt Finn said to somebody. I'm going backwards. So anyway, yeah, Barbara, the picture might be better because it's live as opposed to a pre-record. Let's see. So you just got a taste for what a live show would be like. It's the same material I covered this morning. Probably a little bit more because we took a little more time. Oh, it's already 10:30. So we're a half an hour over. That's why it took more time. So again, for those of you who came in late, today's show was a pre-record. I accidentally deleted the second part of tonight's show and replayed the second part of last night's show. So sorry about that. So that's why we started up the live stream. Let's see. Twisted, good to see you in here. Who else we got? Who else is here? Just looking to see if there's anything pertinent to what we were talking about. Audrey, you're coming up here for the Depot show with Motherella? That's July 18th. That's coming up in a few weeks. Oh, you're not going to come up? Oh, you're not sure if you're going to come up. Yeah. Who knows what's going on? Of course, where we do that show down in Hastings, Minnesota, you're a good 30 miles or so south of Minneapolis area. You're really out in the country. So down across the river. So Let's see what else we got going on. Leslie, you should make it to one of our live Situation Room shows at the depot. So it's down in Hastings on July 18th coming up. Let's see. Scrolling backwards just to see if there's anything pertinent in here. Yeah, Delaney, Custer's Last Stand, right? The Greasy Grass, the Little Bighorn, as the whites knew it. He died on June 25th of 1876, right? And that's a place we'd like to go visit. I've never been there. I wanted to take the family there this summer. We'll have to see how things go. That was the plan at Christmas time anyway. We'll see how things go with virus and shit. So we might make it out there yet. Of course, it gets really hot out there in July and August and September. So we'll see. You got to go all the way through the Black Hills. It's funny. I think of Custer's Battlefield, the Dakotas, as being really close to us. We're Minnesota, and of course, just to the west of us, you have the Dakotas. And then right across Dakota, you've got Wyoming. And of course, that's where the Greasy Grass is, right across the border into Wyoming, a few miles. Well, I found out that that's just like from here driving out to my daughter's wedding in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina last summer with the family. That was 950 miles. And so you can do the math on driving that. I just found out it's the same almost exact number of miles, 950 miles to go from here to the Little Bighorn. You got to cross through the Dakotas, all of western Minnesota and the Dakotas, and cross over into Wyoming. So it'll be a 2-day trip with the kids easily, maybe even 3 if we stop to see stuff. So, which we will do. So, Steve Clark, howdy again. And let's see what else we got. I guess Rocky didn't, says Audrey. I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's see. I have to check my calendar. I think that'd be fun, says Leslie. Let's see. Claudette, nice to see you. Glad to see you in here. I am stepping on JV's show right now, Jim Johnson. But I think we'll make this last a couple more minutes and we'll sign out. It's 10:30. It's a half hour longer than the normal show takes. That's what happens when I go live. And we go past the boundaries of the actual show. And hey, little tweet, you want to come and say hi? Nope. Okay. It's my 5-year-old waving at Rainey over there.
She wants to go to bed and I'm not ready.
Oh, I see. All right. Oh, there's no JV show tonight? Well, look at that. We're free and in the clear. I got my dots. I'm going to have some dots. Even though it's bad to chew on the radio, I'm now done with the official show. He's not enough going on. Take your lap, Scotty. So, and see, America is huge to me. Says Julie. You only have 5 million people in New Zealand. Well, that's about the population of the state of Minnesota, I think. One of 50 states. So, what is it, about 5 million in Minnesota?
I thought we were at, I thought it was 12 million for population.
12 million. Hang on. Let's find out real quick. Hey, Google, what's the population of the state of Minnesota?
In 2019, the population of Minnesota was 5,639,632.
I'm wrong.
There you go. Rainey was wrong. I'll forgive you. I just swallowed a dot whole. That's what I get for talking and chewing. So about the same as New Zealand. And we've only got really two major cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Duluth is a small city up on Lake Superior. And you got Fargo, Moorhead. They kind of span the North Dakota and South Dakota or Minnesota borders. You got Mankato, university town. That's about it for major towns. So, yeah, laugh, Steph. Go ahead and laugh it up. Let's see. Audrey, Scotty mentioned a little. Not sure what you meant there, Steve. Iowa Joe, wow, if Minnesota is only 5 million, Iowa has to be like 2 million. Yeah, pretty much. Corn stalks and people put together. So, no, the corn stalks probably outnumber you down there. Dots are good candy. Yeah, I like them. They're, squishy. I like that.
When they're fresh.
So when they're fresh, yeah, we've had some that aren't so fresh. You pop it in your mouth and you're like, oh, it's like chewing a rock. But these are good and fresh. Squishy. All right. Yeah, you got lots of hogs done in Iowa too. Pigs and hogs. All right. You can see where this conversation's going. I'm pretty much done. That's what I get for chewing while I'm talking. Drove through a few years back to South Dakota. Lots of corn, indeed. And the Dakotas, flat, unless you get to the Black Hills. So. All right. You know what, folks? I think I'm done. We got through more material than I got through on the actual show. You'll see I'll reload that show. It'll be up in the archives if you want to watch it. You connect dots. Good thing, Barbara. I connect them in my belly. And let's see. I got nothing else for tonight. You just sit and bullshit for a while, but I don't want to do that. I got kids to help Rainey put to bed and put Rainey to bed. Rainey, the kids are going down. The dog and cat are going down. I think it's only appropriate that you should go down too. So,
time for Scotty to die.
Yeah, she loves me. Ooh, promise?
No, I'm not touching you ever now.
So, good night, Leslie. Good night, Rainey, she says.
Good night, Leslie.
I hope you all have a beautiful weekend. We'll see you on Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain, 7 a.m. Pacific Time. And, why, thank you, Teresa. And Steph, thank you. So, good night, everybody. Thanks for putting up with the snafu in the broadcast. But hopefully I redeemed myself by going live and we covered the same material. So I hope you had a good time. And thanks for being here, sitting with us live. And we'll see you on Sunday morning. Have a good Saturday. Have a good night. That's all. So long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Adieu. To you and you and you. All right, guys. Have a good night. See you later.